Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. This is Isha, and today I want to talk about the book Someone Who Will Love You in All Your Damaged Glory by Raphael Bob Waxberg. So, I read this book first, I think, in 2023 or 2024, and I remember having a full bodied experience. And since then, every year I have reread it at least once. And so, in 2026, I read it just this week, and I thought I wanted to make a review on it, and here it goes. Talking about this book, the first thing I would say is that if I were to describe what it talks about, it's a lot about life and love and how they shape us, how life shapes us, how love shapes us. And some of them are like really weird stories. Some of them have like very fantastical bits. Some of them are even a little weird in a good way. I really like and I love this book. And sometimes the concept or sometimes the message does not hit you or does not really get communicated until the end of the story, and sometimes it is kind of written at the end, like, oh yeah, just like this is what happens, which I was like, it didn't have to be so in your face with that aspect. But I still do think that overall I really like this book, and it has a really good bunch of short stories that are published in this. Another thing that is present in this book is that it is very American coded. So, a lot of the language used, a lot of the references. If you're not from America or not very familiar with that kind of a language or references, there might be parts where you, or and even I didn't relate and I didn't kind of quite get what they were talking about. So, the first story is called Salted Circus Cashews, and this is like, I think, only 2 to 3 pages long, and it's basically talking about getting the faith to love again. The ending kind of being like, I don't have any guarantee that this is going to turn out well. I do not have any proof that this is going to turn out well, but I know that this is going to turn out well. The second one is called short stories, and I think a common theme in a lot of this is the fantasy that we have of love. It's like just a bunch of paragraphs that are written one after another, and I think a lot of them are related to a common thread of what we fantasize that love would be or what relationship would be, rather than what it actually is. So, talking about the third story, a most blessed and auspicious occasion. So, this is one of the longer stories. I think this is over 20 pages long. And it is very interesting. I think this is one of the stories I like best in this book. And it is about weddings, families, traditions, and as we're navigating how a wedding takes place, so this couple basically decides to get married, and they're like, we're going to have a very small ceremony, but then we also have all the family members having their opinions, and like, are we going to follow the traditions, are we not going to follow the traditions? And it's kind of just navigating a lot about the relationship, a lot about life, and you're kind of reading this through the guy's perspective. So how he is kind of navigating the pre-wedding preparations and jitters as his family and his bride and the bride's friend and everyone is also having their opinions. And at the end, you see how during the wedding kind of, is not what they anticipated or what they had decided in the beginning, but it's still a very enjoyable and a very fun wedding, just because they are getting married, and at the end of the day, that's what matters. The fourth one is again something that I found very interesting. It's called Missed Connections. They both are sitting in the subway and they never get to talk, or they never like initiate any conversation or any talk with each other. And I think that, in one way, it like really reflects how, it's like you miss all the chances that you don't take. And not to say that you should be looking at relationship as like chances or things you should grab onto and take, but yeah, just this misconnections of like, hey, I will do this, I will do this, I will at some point after this station, after this point, after that point, but like, you might as well do it now. If you have the thought, if you have the intention, you might as well do it now. And waiting like for the perfect moment or waiting for like some kind of opening is maybe just like a delay or procrastination technique. And if you just want to do something, just do it. So the fifth story is the Serial Monogamist Guide to Important New York City Landmarks. So I've never been to New York and I don't know anything about New York. So I do not really have a reference to these places, but I love how the author is describing and navigating through the cities through the various relationships that the person has had, through the various events that took place at like several points in the city with different people. I think that was like so interesting and that was so new to me. And the sense of nostalgia, something that is associated with each place of like, hey, here I did this with this person, this place was my younger self in this relationship doing this. And yeah, I think that I found that like really interesting, the way he's like really pulled out not just New York City as a city, but the emotion and like a storyline, how that person's life and experiences are connected to various locations in New York City. So the sixth story is We Men of Science. Now this again was very interesting. There is this concept of like an opposite universe or of an opposite world, and a lot of it in some ways don't make sense. Has more fantastical bits, but what I really liked about the story is this um, conversation of good and bad and opposites. And there's this point where the main character is basically thinking about one day when he was in the subway and this very bad thing happened and he did nothing about it, and that still bugs him to this day. But now he thinks that if he goes to an alternate universe, he would meet someone, another version of him who's the opposite of him, who would have done something about that big bad thing. But as it turns out, that other him didn't actually do something. The only difference, the only thing that makes it the opposite of him is that that day when that big bad thing was happening on the subway, he does not think about it, does not bother him anymore. So it's kind of really intriguing in the way they just pull out the meaning of opposite, of what we think of being opposite, like of who I am, and would the opposite of me be the polar opposite of me, and what it really means, right? Like if you have a cat, what would be the opposite? Is it that there is no cat, or is there a dog, or is it a different cat? Like what are we associating with opposites? And the seventh story is Lies We Told Each Other, and it is a bunch of bullet points. It is so interesting to me. I feel like I've said the word interesting so many times in this video, but how the author has relayed an entire story of two people meeting, of two people interacting, of two people just how their relationship is going just through those phrases and those lines. Some of these bullet points that are written, they're just written so casually. They're like such common sentences that maybe we use in the everyday, but the fact that it is paired with the heading of Lies We Told Each Other just hits you so hard. It's like, whoa. I don't know what else to say to expand on it. So the eighth story is called These Are Facts. So this is a story of a teenage girl who's graduated out of high school and she's spending this vacation with her parents and her half brother that she's not seen in around a decade or so. And this story for me was a little harder to navigate about what exactly are they talking about. I mean, on one hand, it was kind of, I think, in one way, through the trip, the girl herself is confronting and just acknowledging the kind of family dynamics that her family has, like the fact that she has a half brother that she's not seen in a decade, and uh, how her mom is or how her dad is. But I think the story is more so concentrated on the relationship between her and her half brother. I think something else that also I think was the story that was trying to say is like, even though this girl is seeing so many adults in her life, being so imperfect, being good and bad, being caring and also not caring. I think, it's kind of just expressing her emotion or her love for them regardless. I don't know if this is the correct interpretation, but that is kind of what I came up with, and I did have to sit with it for a while. I do think even after this, I am going to have to sit with it for a while to actually think about so many layers that are actually revealed in this story. So the ninth story is Lunch with the Person Who Dumped You. This was so interesting. So the first time I read it, I was laughing. I was laughing so bad. I couldn't stop. I found this as one of the most hilarious stories in the entire collection of short stories. Something I really like about this is the various possibilities of how is the lunch going to be like with the ex that dumped you. And it's like going through all of it, like the lunch in which you make up, the lunch in which you do it for the old time's sake, the lunch in which you kind of just argue about it more and try to be like, yeah, I was the one who was not at fault. And as you're going through this, you're just seeing the kind of mundaneness, the before and after of being in a relationship. The 10th story is Rufus. So this is written from a dog's point of view. And I think I really like how the human is the center of the story, but the story is not written from the perspective of the human. You see how much for Rufus, who's the dog, his human is the center of his world, and how when his human is in a bad mood, he's also in a bad mood. How he and also this contrast of how he thinks that, oh yeah, the human's not that intelligent, so I need to actually emotionally tune into the human's emotions. I also found it very interesting that they've named the humans Monster Man. I think also for me, this story kind of almost felt like a child who depends on a parent and what that world would feel like. And I'm pretty sure, like, even the same for pets. And, like, how even though it is Rufus's story and it's about his day and his life, it's kind of revolving around his owner, which is the human. And even how in children's lives, even though it's their lives, it kind of, in a lot of ways, I think, center around their parents' emotions or their parents' reactions. So, the rules of taboo, it is very interesting. It's a story that's said through a game, right? So basically, whenever you say a word, and you have to make the other person guess it, but you cannot say that word. You have to, and you cannot say the opposite or synonyms of it. You have to kind of describe that word in various ways. So I think it really reiterates the complexity of the human language, and also of how a lot of times we say so many things in so many different ways instead of just directly telling what we mean. So the 12th story is Up and Comers. So it's a story about a rock band, and these people are also superheroes. And as you see, and their powers basically get more and more amplified when they get drunk. I also think that there is this maybe undertone of these people who are in a band, but they're also so drunk and so high all the time. They do not really have a hold of what they're doing. And so as more and more time goes on, they just spend more and more time drunk. They have like not very solid memories, or they get tired of like constantly battling these monsters and demons and all of those things. So I think there's also like a metaphor there, obviously, of like maybe even dealing with your emotional monsters and emotional demons, obviously, of dependency on alcohol. But I also think that it's kind of showing about the imperfectness of humans. There is this point in the story where the main character basically says that she believes she's special and that she should do something big and great. And by the end of the story, she walks away from the band, and she's in her childhood room. She's with another band member, Lizzie, and how it's like a perfectly normal day, but how walking away from the band and kind of starting life in a new way that is different from being kind of always addicted or always drawn to being like a superhero or a rock star, and just being herself and living a normal day. That's bravery, and that's what brave for her. So I really like that contrast in the beginning of the story and at the end of the story. So the 13th story is called Move Across the Country. So this is more so about, I think, the repetitiveness and the humanness of life, right? That no matter where you go, uh, if you change a job, if you change your pin code, whatever you're changing, who you are as a person does not change until that is itself the effort that you're putting in. I also like that the kind of deep attachment that they have put with humans and sadness, and how that is kind of like an inescapable emotion. I also like this emotion of hope that is still put forward in the story, of that you can go ahead and you can go to a new place and you can again start somewhere new. The 14th story is You Want to Know What Plays Are Like. So Dusty has written a play about his family as they took a trip to the Niagara Falls. Now, art is deeply personal, and so is this play. But in the audience is sitting one of his sisters who is deeply disturbed by what she sees in that play. I think it deals a lot with family tragedy, as it talks about how one of their sisters has passed away due to drug overdose. On the other hand, I also think it kind of questions about art. How personal is it? Of what do we express through it? How much of it is our story to tell? And but I think what this story more so really focuses on is this kind of a family wound, and how a family is coping up after a tragedy in different ways. How the parents are disconnected, how Dusty has written a play about this, and how she is kind of just in her own way coping with other things. So it was a little more of a heavier story. So the 15th story is called The Poem. So the poem is a poem about two people, Fernando and Wendy, and how they are kind of. So Wendy has broken up her marriage and she's spending some time with Fernando, who's obviously not her ex-fiance slash ex-groom. The 16th story, The Average of All Possible Things, again one of my favorites in this entire collection. It's about Lucinda, who is described as this very average person who has a very average day and who does everything very averagely, and how she is so she's working at this law firm where she was initially dating her co-worker slash boss Gavin, and now they've broken up after a couple of months. So in this story, I found so many things interesting. I think the first thing is the different kind of perspective that Lucinda herself has in and out of the relationship, right? When she does she think she's funny or not? Um, how she felt special when she was in a relationship, and then later on, she's kind of feeling very average. How there's a part of her who wants to do something like very rebellious. There's this point in the story when Lucinda is talking to her ex-boyfriend Gavin when they were dating, and she basically points out how she was not promoted to junior partner. And then Gavin is like, you don't even want to be a junior partner. And then she's like, who says so? And so there's this clear kind of a distinction between a woman. Does she get to be a career woman and a girlfriend and a wife material, or does she not? I think that was also so interesting to see here. And also the idea of success, like, do we want it, do we not want it? And in some ways, no matter how much we say we don't want a success, or we don't want these like very conventional traditional things, some part of us does get conditioned by society to want them. I feel like I'm not doing the story justice with my explanation, but if you pick up this book, definitely do read this story. Um, Something I also liked at the ending that was said is that it gets better with time. Anything given enough time, it gets better and it gets well. So the 17th story is More of You Than You Already Are. It's based in this park that has presidents, like obviously not the real ones, people who dress up in president costumes. And yeah, it's like kind of like an educational slash amusement park kind of thing. And it had interesting aspects in it. Again, it's an interesting story. It has like some bit more of a fantastical genetic biotechnology bits in it. So the 18th and the last story is We'll Be Closed on Friday, 18 July. Sorry for any inconvenience. And this is the last story. I do think that for a last story, this was very underwhelming. We could have ended it on a much more better story, on a much better note. But this is what we get. And it's basically about like a love affair of some temporarily, like maybe even like a one night stand, but basically of a temporary love affair. So these were all the 18 stories that were there in this book. I hope I did enough justice to describing how I felt about them and what I wanted to say. This is my first time trying to do this kind of a review and trying to just put my thoughts as I read books into YouTube. And I hope you liked it. If you did, do like the video. Do comment any other books that you think you liked. And I will see you in my next video. Bye.